All right, welcome to the build. So it's moving quickly.
And their product velocity is intense. We're both pretty involved in the LangChain community.
This is going to be an industry, like the whole thing is going to explode.
The hype cycle, it's like just because you hear everybody start talking about these things doesn't necessarily mean it's the right.
Need to go back, find out more because it's really interesting.
We're both obsessed with AI and their entire stack is just pivoted to agents.
The next question that usually comes after that is like, well, I'm fine-tuning an open model.
That's the biggest thing with the latest spec.
It's an exploding distribution vector.
I'm really excited. I think everybody is. I'm not the only one.
The build.
I just went and bought like a super expensive pair of headphones, and this sounds crisp.
Yeah, those are super nice because you got the open back ones.
Yeah, just playing with the gain.
These are like the same one, but these are the ones that I use. 70 Pro.
They're the same ones. Yeah, sick. Well, the guy basically said that
but
they're the same.
Yours are open back though.
Yeah,
They're
but he said it was
different.
He said, well, in the shop I was in, they're like, oh, they're the same price. I'm like, well, what's the difference? He's like, oh, spatial audio kind of mixing is a bit better when it's closed back, but not as good for like DJ monitoring. So, but I've got some HMI for that.
Yeah, and then they make I think I have both. They're the high impedance. You know, there's like the higher. I can't remember. There's ohms, something with the ohms, but
yeah, it's about the ohms. You sound like that young OpenAI guy who's basically telling everyone that we're all going to die and enjoy our last days of humanity. And his whole investment thesis was remember the ohms. And I'm like, I've got to get his name. He's like the ohms. Remember the ohms. I think he did it's like AI 2027. It's this website. I'll pull it up and you can see it. And like, he got a bit of traction on, because it's pretty like dramatic. And some YouTubers picked it up and basically told everyone that the world is going to end and everything is over and everyone's going to lose their jobs. And yeah, the research here is like compute forecast. Where is it? It's the ohms, which is basically his way of saying.
yeah, I guess
Compute.
I missed that whole story.
Nah, it wasn't much of a story. I think he was like a younger researcher at OpenAI, and he went out. I think he's done pretty well, but like started a fund or something. But I would be surprised if the performance of the fund wasn't just his personal shares in OpenAI. Speaking of shares in OpenAI, so I met a couple of dudes at the All In conference from San Fran, and I didn't realize just how common secondary investing is now. This guy, like, I won't mention his specific name in case we publish this, but he runs panel beating shops. He's like a very successful but small business owner, right? Has a bit of crypto. But he's just invested in all of these via secondaries in all of these super successful like startups, like, well, not startups, AI companies like OpenAI, Anthropic, Stripe, like all of them. And he said, oh yeah, my buddy, because he just lives in San Fran, just got him access via these secondary platforms that like build up a position and then sell them off.
Well, how's that work? Is it like somebody that worked there and then sold off some of their shares and then they can just sell them to anybody? And then it's kind of like a little circle of people that know when someone's trying to sell them, I would imagine.
Yeah, basically it's like employees maybe who've sold their shares. Sometimes secondaries are like approved by the board or as part of a capital raise. So like a infamous secondary was the Atlassian founders took a big secondary chunk right before they went public. And that was basically so that, and also other investors sort of allow them to do secondaries where they might do a capital raise and then the founders will put an extra chunk in and get that cash out at that capital raise value so that they're not under pressure. Like investors are like, oh yeah, if you get 10 million out now, then you're more likely to go for like $1 billion exit because you're not worried, because the difference between $10 million and like $100 million to personally is very little. Whereas this is different where it's like these companies are building up these secondary positions. So Robinhood did this apparently in Europe where they tokenized OpenAI shares and they built up a position, enough of a position on these secondary markets, buying from other parties or potentially other funds or whatever, and then basically sold it to retail investors. Yeah, but it sounds like it's more common than I realized. Like it's probably how all these people are getting rich and I'm staying poor.
Small circle. Well, I'm sure there are people who make their living like exclusively that way, like kind of like headhunter type people. I would There has to be.
Yeah, angels, really, like professional angels, angel investors. There's also a fund I saw the other day, which all they do is just try and invest in the high-performing angel investment companies. Like, so they just basically try and find the highest performing angel investors, and then will just go after the companies that they've invested in. So they don't even have their own investment thesis. It's like, we're just going to back the winners that these winner investors back, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, that's how you form a bubble, I think.
Well, yeah, or it's how you win.
Basically,
Like,
everyone, like multiple layers of people, like, yeah, it's good, and just keeps driving things up. But yeah, that'd be nice. I don't know.
I don't know if I think in venture, isn't it? The stats I always see is like there's just like a lot of people losing money, and a couple and a group of people at the top who are making fucking shitloads of money. Like, I thought it was a massive bell curve distribution of like, so there's a lot of losing funds, particularly now because like it's hotter than it's ever been, right? Well, at least it was in the ZERP era. Maybe it's not anymore, but I thought that was the case. So it was always like, yeah, there might be a bubble. That bubble accrues to like just a very small handful of people, in which case, if you're on the coattails of it, it doesn't make a difference. At least you're not losing. Anyway, this is me talking shit about an industry I don't even work in.
When people, even lately, are like, oh, the bubble's coming, and it's like, that doesn't faze me, because like, yeah, if you have millions invested, then yes, it's a big deal. But like, for anyone who just kind of, the demand's not going away,
Yeah.
What do you
I'm not really worried about a bubble. I'm not really worried about a bubble, but I think that's mainly because it wouldn't affect us as much. So I was looking at Claude 3.5. I know we want to talk about that today. And I was doing a quick test run, Claude 4.5, pardon me, test run to build like an analyst agent with LangChain and LangGraph. And I wanted it to build a front end and a back end. And it did it pretty fast in a way that sort of it was really good, actually. It didn't have the same stumbling blocks that I'd seen it have before. And so yeah, I was going to talk through how it did this, and then we could maybe spin up a couple of examples. And they've updated the UI and stuff as well.
The plugin.
I use Claude Code, yeah, as a plugin, yeah, into Cursor. So because I like cursors,
I keep forgetting about that.
Because you can then
use. Is it any different?
You can use quick edits and chat completions and stuff in the tabs, and some of the things I like about Cursor, but it's basically the same. It's basically the same. What's that noise? Yeah, so like it just spins up a version in a terminal effectively. But then you can also, yeah, here's the Claude settings. And actually I might show you this now in Cursor. In these settings here. I've never used their background agents.
Are you using the agents, like Cursor agents as well? Yeah,
I do, but it's a little bit, I might start using them more because of one of these features they've released actually, but it's sort of hard if I'm using Claude in agent mode like it is here. So this is like this is everything that the actual agent went through as Claude. Then I'll just use the ask but don't execute agent query in actual Cursor in their AI sidebar thing. But what I did notice is Cursor released, obviously they have Claude 4.5 Sonnet in here now. They also released a couple of things into their beta. There's the browser agent, which I think is basically just a plugin on top of Chrome DevTools. But then they also had this, which I didn't know, which is this Git work trees thing, where basically when you're creating agents, it creates this work trees automatically for you, so you don't have to do any config, which actually is kind of cool. And I don't think Claude Code has that function, so I might start using their agents more.
Yeah, Claude does.
It does. How do I get access to that?
Yeah, it does. There's so many things like that where not get so sidetracked, but I need to take some time and do like a round 2 of training on all these different features, because I'm still not using everything that it's capable of.
Well, I guess we're in here now, but so this is Claude. They've redesigned the interface and stuff as well. But then if I go, here are all the / commands.
But it's Claude Code SDK. It's just a different interface, right? Like everything is exactly the same, or have you noticed features in the plugin that don't exist otherwise?
I haven't noticed anything, no, but maybe I have to. /commands. Isn't there a settings? Wouldn't be config? I don't know if that, there's no mention command in there. But then if I go into the terminal, I should be able to find it. So maybe it is slightly different if I go in here. Say, hey, Claude. Is it Claude? Oh, I'll just kick it over and then I'll see if I can get in there.
Just just Claude.
Okay. And they also redesigned this, which is cool, which is cute. /terminal. Would it be terminal setup? Let's see what there is. Bash is clear, compact, config, init, install the GitHub app, no memory, migrate, install a model.
You're looking for the Git trees?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I am. Because I didn't know that was there. To-dos, upgrade. I do like that to-do list thing. It must be in...
Yeah, and
config.
one day I started looking at, I think it's related to Git trees, but you can manage multiple agents. Like if you have, say, a mono repo, you can orchestrate like focused agents in certain areas. I forget what they call that.
Well, isn't that just the sub-agent manager, this one here? That's the one we were going through a while back.
It was different. And now I don't remember, so don't have to act like I know what I'm talking about here, because it was just something I was playing around with. But I know they do have Git trees, and then I'll find what I'm thinking of. It was like 2 weeks ago, some way to focus your agents.
They are trying to, they had a release, they've been pretty active actually. So they had a couple of releases which were cool. There was this big blog post on more context engineering, sort of an update to that recent, the last one they did. But then they also talked about the Claude Code SDK for building like non-coding agents, and how basically code development enables you to use Claude Code for all sorts of other things. So I wonder if they're going to try and like productize that as like an agent kind of building framework, kind of to compete with LangChain and that sort of stuff. Be interesting.
Yeah, well, we'll hit on it later, but I was talking to you about the Claude Imagine, basically like a vibe code thing. Last week we talked about the Cloudflare Vibe SDK, and there's a number of things from different providers that I feel like are all kind of running in parallel, and it's like along the lines of vibe coding, but not so much for like developers. I see it potentially geared towards just the everyday
That's
work.
what actually, yeah. So just before this we're recording, I was on the LangChain call with those guys, and they were talking through this middleware update that they've got as well. And I reckon once we get our hands on that properly, we should dive into it, because I hope that we'll actually do that for LangChain as well, where they can build in a few more abstractions and make it a bit more available to like your average, everyday, less technical developer or vibe coder even, because it is quite challenging to use if you're not like a bit more like yourself. Yeah, it was cool. They were talking through a couple of the other kind of updates to, there's like content block abstractions I want to use for like standardizing content from different model providers and stuff. So yeah, that's why I was keen to spin that agent up on Claude and actually go into it.
Oh, I guess we don't have to dive in. We don't have to dive totally into it, but what did you learn? I mean, in my reading, it was basically like pre-commits or a pre-tool use. So if you want to do like more interrupts, human in the loop, notifications, a lot of the same type of stuff that we're talking about with Claude. That's what I took away from it.
I have to admit, I'm not technical enough, and it seems like a lot of people haven't actually used the alpha yet, so I couldn't really get a solid handle on it. But from what I can tell, I think it's them trying to put a bunch of this stuff under the hood of the framework, so that it functions a bit more like a web development framework you might be familiar with like preloaded, the Rails thesis, which is like intelligent defaults and a bunch of helper functions that sort of expose a bunch of logic underneath the hood that predefine patterns of execution for you. So in that world, and this is the only analogy I can give, is like in that world, they had a very predefined kind of pattern around SaaS web apps, right, around the MCP, and say active record, which integrated with a database. And then above that, they had all these helper functions that basically you would just hook into. You're like, all right, I'm defining certain things that this object can do based on the patterns that are given to me by the framework. And I kind of feel like these guys are trying to create a level of abstraction above the standard, like the really low level stuff that they've got, so that you could step into it and just generate and build agents across a range of different use cases without having to worry about or learn a bunch of the framework details beneath. That's what I assume is going on, and that's what I can see, what I think the vision is. But they're trying to kind of balance the very technical user side that's familiar with the platform, with the framework, has been on it for a long time, plus all of these apps that are in production, with the expansive growth segment of new developers they want to bring in. And that's hard. But that's, I think, that's why they're doing it, I think.
Yeah, LangChain and companies like them are in an interesting spot. Like you said, got to balance the super technical. I mean, that's where they come from. That's who their audience really is. But
yeah, and I think I don't know if they're getting
pressure or feel the pressure to create like more applications. It feels like all the providers are taking things almost to the application level, or hinting at it at least.
I don't know if those guys ever would, but like we've covered on their agent, like the apps that they have built, they're more like to demonstrate the power. But I definitely and they were at pains to specify that you could go down into the framework and get your hands dirty with the actual detail. What I like about it is it's sort of like they're driving a production kind of pattern around how to build agents, which I think is better than what I see I would say that because I'm biased, because I like them, but better than what some of the other guys do, because they're sort of like, here's some really here's some high level kind of components that you can just use, go off and do. And we don't really kind of give you like a framework, a pattern match to follow. That's what I think anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's cover that next week, maybe, if we get enough time. So today, we want to go through Claude 4.5. I want to talk about the OpenAI GDPEVal stuff in the context of like building a massive pitch around why an organization should transform itself around AI. And we could talk through a bit of that. Sora 2 got released, and that's exploding. I don't know if you're covering that. What else are we going through on the docket? Where do you want to start? MCP. I actually read through this MCP thing you sent me for a reason, for a change. I actually read through the MCP stuff.
What was it? On which one?
Your MCP. Is it MCP as API code from Cloudflare? So I'm keen to talk to you about that, actually.
Yeah, let's definitely touch on that. I think that would be good at the end. It might be a good ending point on some of the other Anthropic stuff, because we had the Claude Imagine, which is kind of silly, but I think it has serious implications for the future, or very near future. And then earlier this week, I got access to the browser extension, the Anthropic Claude Chrome extension. And it actually seems pretty cool. I didn't realize that they limited it to 1,000 people. So I'm fortunate, I guess. Maybe I just signed up early. I don't really remember, but.
Well, can you show me that? Can we start there? So Claude 4.5, right? Do you want to start there? We may as well hit it.
Well, I don't know if you looked at, I sent them right before. I recorded a couple just quick videos, and one of them, I kind of combined GDPEVal, Claude Imagine, and the browser extension.
Cool.
So
that sounds great.
As it kind of
show it to me. I couldn't get into them.
Off the wall use case, but it's kind of shows you if you want to push the limits with like these toy apps, basically.
Let's pull it up. So let's dive into that. I was reading a little bit about Claude 4.5, just trying to get a sense of it. I'll put these in the show notes, but Claude Sonnet 4.5, in my testing of using it, like very briefly, seems very fast, which is what a lot of people are talking about. And there is like a degree of uplift. They've got, is that the Claude for Chrome extension you're going to show? Yeah, the Claude for Chrome extension. There's this crazy like Imagine thing, which is like an example of like live streamed UI, which is pretty wild. And they've added a couple of features to the API, like context editing and a memory tool, which is kind of interesting. The actual benchmarks that I was interested in, so they always have their standard benchmark kind of card, there's the agentic coding benchmark is 82% on the SWE-bench verified, which is the best in the market so far. So 82% on that compared to 74.5% performance for GPT-5, right? there are rumors that Gemini 3 is going to launch next week as well, which will be exciting. So we'll see how they go on this. But it's basically just the standard kind of march towards, high performance. Terminal Bench, which is that like terminal coding performance benchmark, which we've mentioned before, which is pretty cool. That one significantly shifted, which is this agentic kind of task execution improvement that they're constantly going towards, which is autonomous execution and like at least 50%. I think Terminal Bench is like 50% success rate. Quote me on that. Claude Sonnet 4 was 36. This one, Sonnet 4.5, is like 50%. GPT-5 on that's like 43%. They're all pretty close, but it's significantly better than their previous model, right? At that smaller level, lower cost, faster throughput equivalent. Yeah, so pretty exciting. And again, it's basically just mainly coding is what it excels at. So yeah, I'm keen to see this stuff if you want to share it.
Yeah, which one you want to hit on? I guess we can just look at both of them. I'll show.
Show both.
Only have one monitor. So Claude Imagine. It was just a subnote on the Claude Sonnet 4.5 release. And it just said, this is a research preview and it's only available for 5 days. So I think tomorrow is the last day that they'll have this available. And I think it's only for Macs. In fact, if you just go to your normal Claude web app, they have this little shortcut down here. And you click on that and it takes you into Claude Imagine. So like I said, they really didn't publish too much information about this. They didn't really tell you like why, what the purpose is, how it works. But you can kind of gather. And my take is they're showing off the capabilities of 4.5, which I think is really cool because a lot of the times when new models come out, you'll see, YouTubers creating 3JS, and that's kind of like the vibe benchmark, right? But I think this is a really cool example you can put your hands on, and it's way better than some demo like that. So the interesting thing here is that it generates all the code in real time. It doesn't persist anything. So a lot of vibe code apps, you are generating the code and it's saving it and it continues to build, new modules or add features. This completely does everything in real time. So they give you some random examples here. So I'll just click one of these so you can kind of get the idea.
Create a steampunk time machine interface for exploring history.
And that's with this the way they set this up, it's hard to read. And then as you iterate, the conversation goes away. So you can't even really go back and look at what it was doing. Yeah. But as you see, it just generated that in real time. But if you look at these buttons, the data doesn't actually exist yet. So when I click on that, it will generate it in real time. So this is, I assume, storing everything in memory, and they're using some type of sandbox. And my assumption is that there's a robust architecture of deep agents, sub-agents that are handling all of this in the background. But of course, we don't know that for a fact.
But then, like the user click, so you clicked on this safety check button. It's like, is this like, so the whole idea of this is like, it's a representation of like just-in-time software. Yeah. Imagine this is Shakespeare's desktop, right? Build tools for a medieval coder. Like it's a toy, right? But the vision is like, it's like, here is what it looks like when an LLM runs your entire operating system and you generate software on the fly to just do stuff, right? And everything is a question or everything is like a user-generated prompt.
Right. But where this is going to become like real time is with MCP, A2A agents, sub-agents. There's a number of things that we've talked about recently, in fact, that they're all schema-based. So you can create, like we're talking about sub-agents. It's really just a markdown file with a description, a system prompt, and then the tools defined. There's the MCP registry and this server.json. So the way I see it, my assumption is that when you combine the schema-based components of a whole agentic system, that's where this will become really powerful. Now, in this instance, they're saying nothing is pre-generated. Basically, nothing is templated out, which I'm curious about that. But anyways, just think if you have like a whole team of predefined agents, a whole set of predefined tools, and then you can just as needed spin those up on the fly. That's where I think everything is going. So to me, this is a preview into that world. Tom, what I thought was interesting, they give you a upload button here, and you can only upload images. So if you want to do any type of like data analysis or something like that, I was like, well, how would you do that? So I took the GDPEVal information, and then I put it on our GitHub as a public repository.
It's the GDPEVal is the eval set and the data set from OpenAI around benchmarking their performance of different models on real world verified kind of work tasks that are economically valuable. We can talk through it a little bit later because we're going to talk through it in detail, but yeah, I think we all know what it is.
Yeah, that's where I was like, well, that stuff might have been better before, but maybe.
What do you got up on here? You're just doing some math homework. What is square root?
I'm using a Windows keyboard to control my Mac, so occasionally I press the wrong buttons.
Okay.
Okay, so now you can see these are just this is just data I extracted from that GDPEVal data set, and I reworked it. I didn't really do too much, actually. I used agents to do this, but I took a sample of the tasks and exported those to CSV, Excel, text, and then they have, for each task that they evaluated, they have reference files. So this kind of mimics the real world. Like, hey, this is data that I am responsible for interpreting or doing something with. And there's a lot of there's a lot of data here.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about what else could you do with this besides just make like and then I don't know how to transition this smoothly, but we were talking about the Claude Chrome extension, right? So my thought, I was like, maybe we can use the browser extension in collaboration with Imagine. And what can we do there? So
So Claude, the browser extension, basically is their way of just connecting up with more stuff, right? So they're pretty like slow on the uptake with this. And I think they experimented with this a while back and then shut it down. I remember them talking about some component of this a while ago. I don't know
specifically about a browser extension. The thing is, it's really just computer use. And they released computer use maybe like October or November 2024.
Yeah. They were the first ones to do that, weren't they?
Yeah. And then I feel like MCP really kind of took over, and I got really excited about the computer use when it first came out, but really the reason was it was like one of the first ways that you can pull in your own context and actually make use of your data. But once MCP hit, seems it's a much better way to control things. So here they have it in a sandbox, and I don't know, Tom, do you hear many people talking about computer use or specific use cases? Because I really haven't.
There are quite a lot. And also because this was an emergent thing, and then like the browser use as a category, there was a bunch of startups that emerged around it, basically giving your agent a browser, like a headless browser, and being able to spin up thousands of them, like potentially gives you the ability to do things on the web that you couldn't do before, right? I think Scrappybarrow was one of the better ones in that domain that I tested. But then once OpenAI launched its like combination of operator plus deep research in their agent, I think these guys had to act, right? They have to play more aggressively in that space. In terms of the use cases, a lot of what I see this as is like on the consumer front, there's an integration with these emergent like transaction protocols, right? So you could basically interact with websites that might not necessarily be connected up directly to the chat interface, but a user still wants to go and purchase something and they've got the right to do it, for example, through credit cards that are stored on ChatGPT or Anthropic or wherever. In the business space, this is great for automating legacy software because there's so much legacy software that's just not connected to anything else or is very locked down to only a couple of different platforms, and and then they charge developers or they charge companies in order to build the integrations, and they just refuse to do anything. So then you could use these tools to circumvent all of that once they become reliable. I'm reading the documentation of this Claude for Chrome. Basically, they're touting that it has significantly less susceptibility to prompt injection, but it's still like potentially significant. So that's like really hard to manage, right? Because like someone stores like a random prompt in a DOM like element that's hidden from the user and it gets picked up by a browser agent, and then bang, like your credit card's been charged $1,000. And like there's some really crazy shit that could happen with this stuff, right?
Yeah. Well, as far as I can tell, the browser extension only uses vision. I could be wrong about that, but that introduces additional risk because there are ways to, and maybe I think you were kind of saying the same thing, like to hide text that humans can't see and it's only readable by the computer.
Mm.
So I've seen some excitement about that lately as far as risk. But yeah, on the blog post, that's primarily what they talk about, I think, if I remember right, is the risks.
Yeah,
and
it's mainly the risks. So yeah, they ask the Claude agent via browser use to confirm whenever it shares personal information or anything specific as a guardrail. And yeah, then managing kind of authentication back between accounts. It's pretty incredible though. Like I hope like this domain is rapidly expanding. I don't know if you've tried Comet from Perplexity. It's great. It's very similar. It's sort of like agentic kind of browser experiences. Yeah, I hope this is just how all of our interaction with the internet kind of transitions. We've got multiple kind of like when you're developing like multiple kind of agents in say Claude or Codex or whatever going off and doing stuff. You've just got multiple personal agents that just go out and do stuff on your behalf. But it's going to take a lot of work from people to make it secure, I'd say.
Yeah, well, we talked about the Cloudflare SDK last week, and the big deal there is basically being able to, I don't know, maybe you could consider it composable infrastructure, where on the fly you can spin up everything that Cloudflare has available, whether it's SQL databases, blob storage, vector databases. So you combine like once, because I'll say this Claude Imagine is quite a bit better than the Cloudflare one, but it's lacking all the infrastructure behind it.
Right.
Anyways, yeah. So here, let me just hit this and we can talk while this runs. I just gave it essentially, this is about as much as Anthropic gave us about Imagine and what it is. It says you have full access to Claude Imagine, a research preview application developed by Anthropic. With Imagine, Claude generates software dynamically. Nothing is predetermined and no code is pre-written. What you see is Claude creating in real time, responding to and adapting based on your request as you interact. Use Imagine as a tool to solve the task below. And I'm not going to read this entire task, but this is from the GDPEVal data set. So just as, I guess, the starting point, you're an IT manager in your company. The organization is a large enterprise, and your IT department supports product development teams, customers, and business users. And if we skip down here, it says the work time study tracked the activities of the organization's employees over the course of a week. Each employee has a role and a list of assigned activities for their role. Throughout a week's time period, each employee day-to-day activities were tracked, and these activities were broadly categorized into 12 high-level categories as follows. And then they have audit and compliance, automation, on down the list, probably 10 different areas. So pretty detailed task here. And then Tom, like I said, the browser extension only allows you to upload images, and that's the same with Imagine. So got creative here. And like I said, I just put these files on GitHub and it was then able to access them. So yeah, a little bit off the wall use case here. but we're using a combination, and it's going out to GitHub, pulling that data set, and then it's going to kick over to Imagine and use that as a tool and to essentially build like a dashboard, data analysis.
Right. And so that highlight or that outline is basically the browser extension acting on this GitHub repo.
Not very helpful if you can't see the whole thing. So yeah, on the right side, this is the browser extension. And then the left panel is Claude Imagine, the vibe code tool. I was really curious about the context window. So it has this little meter here, which is pretty cool. And I thought that once it hit 100, it would just quit. But I think when I ran it for like 20 minutes, I think it went through like 3 or 4 full context windows.
I'm actually curious about that as something that's been commented on is like the time horizon for 4.5 and the upgrade. Because like one of the benchmarks I've been looking at, which only is on 4.1 was like, what's the long time horizon expectation for this model? And some people on X are basically saying, yeah, it's a lot longer. It's a lot more effective. And in my initial testing, like when I was showing you that agent I was building in LangGraph and LangChain before, it was too fast. So it wasn't slow. But I kind of want to know like how long this thing can go for against those benchmarks where I think it's, I'll pull that up while this is going. So what's it actually doing now? So
you see how it's taking screenshots, and I just did it, I think, while we were talking, but I started moving it around, and that will actually mess it up because it's not looking at it in the back. It's looking at the actual screen. So if you move things around and then it goes to take a screenshot, it gets lost. So that was my bad. But I guess, Tom, on the GDPEVal, I looked at the data set, of course, and I read essentially the summary. I didn't read the whole paper, but did they provide any examples of like what the output would look like?
No.
Because
So
that was the whole thing, right? They had professionals, like experienced professionals, create the deliverables and use that as the benchmark, right?
Yeah. So what they in the data sets that I could find, they just had the inputs and then they reported on the outputs, but they didn't actually show the data set for the actual outputs of the tasks that were generated by the AI. So yeah, I can go through the methodology in detail later on, but no is the short answer. And I was looking for that too. But they did provide a couple of snippets as examples on the blog post. They have like a little slider that's like, all right, here's the example of like what someone would like what the output was. Well, this is cool. And it's all in real time. This is sick. I wonder if this will be like an interface. Like, is there a vision in the future of work, the interface where like you have these things kicking off and it's a visual, kind of like how we look at like a cursor experience with the agent where you can see it coding and you can see the diffs in, say, Claude Code's update now, where we've actually just got, I'm a finance person and I've just got a bunch of these people working in different sheets, but I've got views into what's going on and I can interact and go over the top. Like those agent patterns, I want more of those. I want more like, kind of like what I was describing in the creative spaces. Like I want to be able to see more, which is kind of why OpenAI going over the top. Basically, they said like when they released, I think it's their agent, they said they have like the window in the view of like what it's actually doing and exposing all the reasoning like and decisions, in that users really want to be able to see and observe and adjudicate decisions and then be able to interrupt and change path or like, you know, pivot direction or kind of interject into what the agents are doing. But
right,
for something like this, which is
like,
yeah, or just no, I think it's also partly curiosity because it's a novel thing. Maybe that will go away once we, you know, become more used to working with agents and we just like, yeah, I can just wait and see what the outputs are. But like for this sort of thing where it's generating the UI, it's slightly different. Whereas I'm imagining some of these things will just be over the top of Excel. For example, if I've got my agent that's embedded in Excel and I'm a financial analyst and it hooks up to my data stores, then I can just like engage with it in in that environment, but it doesn't feel like all of those UIs are built for the user interacting, whereas none of them really are natively built for an agent interacting or generating and the user interacting with that. So how do you manage, say, UI that's generated on the fly by an agent like this? What do you expose to the user to be able to interact with midstream? How can they explore as it's being generated? Like this future of like on-demand software requires a different UX paradigm. So someone should go out and rebuild Excel.
Have you looked at, sorry, MCP, disclaimer here, but MCP UI? We might have talked about that with the Shopify demos. I think they've kind of taken the charge on that.
There's a bunch of those,
but
yeah.
I think some of what you're talking about is possible with that MCP UI type of framework. So they basically builds out like elements and components, and then it builds you an interface kind of on the fly, I guess. And I don't know.
Yes, that's kind of exactly what I'm talking about.
You want it in Excel. You want it embedded in Excel though, right?
Well, I'm just trying to think about like this is a demo. This is a research demo, right? If you like fast forward 12 months and a bunch of developers are building things like this, kind of like, Copilot Kit, those guys have built something which is like streamable UI components that are hooked into your AI app, and Vercel has this with the AI SDK and it's hooked up to ShadCN and all of those kind of things. If you're really going to use it and augment like higher end knowledge workers with this kind of agent, then you kind of need to have it embedded into the place where they work, but also make it so that they can interject midstream. But how do you do that when maybe they work 100% of the time in Excel? Like, how do you do it? Or like fucking PowerPoint. I hope that goes away. But do you know what I mean? Like, it's not as simple as just like having streamable UI into a web interface. It's just not that. It's not going to actually take off as an augmentation kind of paradigm. But maybe it's not supposed to be, like, because Anthropic covers this in their economic index kind of research around, there is that large distribution of tasks, which is just automation. So maybe it's never going to go into the augmentation space, and chat with tools will always be the augmentation layer, maybe.
Yeah. I'm with you though, because I get frustrated a lot where like the AI and the agents, it does too much. And I want it to do like just a little bit, and then we'll keep talking about it and I iterate. Instead, it always tries to do like one shot everything, and trying to control that sometimes is an issue for me.
Yeah. I wish some of those things, those paradigms that we have now adopted through like Claude MD file, or like a prompting pattern around, say, plan it out, you're in planning mode, all of that stuff, you build your to-do lists, like all of these things. I wish they were just in the UI. So just that should be generated into the UI of like an interface like this, where it's like, all right, I can see the to-do list. I can just edit the to-do list on the fly. I can see the effort level component of each one, and I can just use a slider, all of that sort of stuff. I just wish it was sort of like abstracted up into some of these tools now, because we've had them for a while. Like, we have these things as developers and vibe coders anyway. We've had them for a while. They should just now be abstracted up into the actual kind of interfaces. This is actually, yeah. So while you're bringing that up, the build website, I found like the specific benchmark that I was looking at for this time horizon kind of thing for autonomous agent tasks is called the METR time horizon benchmark. I'll share it, but basically it's like the duration of software engineering tasks that AI performs with a 50% success rate. So they're basically just trying to like map how long these things go, where successful outcome is basically incrementally more challenging tasks. But it hasn't been updated with 4.5, but the GPT-5 release was, and their time horizon is basically on average, or 95% confidence interval is between an hour and almost, over 3 hours. Sorry, over 4 hours at a 50% success rate. But Claude 4.1 Opus, so the larger model, is just under 3 hours. So this should actually be better, this 4.5, right, on that benchmark, based on what you're seeing here anyway.
Yeah, I saw something about like 30 hours.
I always
4.5.
I always see those on X, and I'm like, I don't know if I believe you. But also that's like completely autonomous with a 50% chance of being successful outcome, you know, as opposed to like someone's like, I ran this for 30 hours and it asked me a bunch of questions and I did a bunch of stuff as well. That's slightly different. So what are you doing here to our website?
We'll, I think hopefully next week we'll talk more about the context engineering, some of the stuff we were talking about the other day where these guys were talking about running stuff like all night long.
Yeah. I think we should cover that because there's that evolution, the next evolution of context engineering is becoming more mature. So I think next week we should talk through that and this middleware stuff because I think they go hand in hand. They go hand in hand. Yeah. What are you doing to our website with Claude?
Oh, while we're talking, I just had it run, go to our website and then pull 5 insights from the 5 most recent episodes, just so we can navigate around. You know, a lot of the demos when it comes to like browser use and computer use tend to be like, I don't know, filling forms and calendar invites and stuff like that. But one thing, I hate to admit it, but I still use LastPass. And Claude, the Chrome extension, made me disable LastPass. That's why if you saw I had to type in my credentials there. So there's probably a better way around that, but I thought they were going to solve that for sure. And then I didn't get to it, but I was going to look at running tests with that browser comp, the OpenAI eval set.
Well, that was on actually the 4.5 benchmarks was on there. They actually have those, which is like, sorry, not browser comp. They have agentic tool use, the R2 bench, but sorry, that's different. What I was going to mention is if you really want to see it, the browser use guys, actually. So browser use is the open source package. I think it's Y Combinator backed. Check them out on GitHub. But that's the eval set, yeah. Sorry, browser use. They actually are doing like a little, like 100 apps you can build with browser use things. And it's like news, customized news stuff. A lot of it is sort of just like stop paying for APIs and just go and use browsers and agents to just go and get everything you need from the internet whenever you need it, which is a lot of what I see. Rather than just like enabling things, it's just like, all right, we'll just go and, I don't know. A lot of it's just like personal use stuff. Just go and like monitor all of these products I'm thinking you're buying and then buy send me the cheapest one when it comes online. Or go and get me all of the, like, apply for 100 million jobs on my behalf, all of that sort of stuff. Like a lot of it's sort of like toy use kind of use cases. Yeah.
Did you say these guys had some type of eval or I see this like awesome prompts?
No, the browser use, those guys, they're just a startup browser use, but there is a browser use eval. Yeah, I think it's Browse Comp. It was the one you were looking at. And then WebBench, I think, is one we have talked about as well.
Yeah, Browse Comp. That's the OpenAI one. Browse Comp.
That's the OpenAI was. But browser use is like a leading kind of open source browser kind of like package you can use.
Yeah, I didn't even read that. You have to fill these in.
Oh, the variable. Find the latest research papers on agentic AI and compare pricing with key features of top 3 competitors in the compute use agent space: Anthropic, OpenAI.
And what's the third one? Can't even just throw browser use, even though it's a little bit different, but whatever. But I just don't feel like this is a good, it's not really meant for research and things like that. So that's what I'm curious about is kind of where's the break point of, of course, like filling forms, initiating orders and things like that. That's what most people are talking about. But in fact, we're talking about world models a lot. And I've always been of the opinion that you can only get so much context with the text. So to me, it's very powerful when you combine them. And I could see this browser use. I guess maybe I'm just such a MCP nerd. Keep already in the short time, I'm like, I want to use this as a tool with another agent.
Sorry, explain that more.
Like if you had, say, sure, Claude Desktop, and you initiate some type of research project, but there's a lot of images or things that are not necessarily in, like a Firecrawl might not get. Well, I guess Firecrawl does images, just depends. But you might use like one of those other tools for gathering tons of text and then secondary context of like an interface or some type of images or things like that, and potentially even audio.
Yeah, or video.
Yeah, I'm just saying that I couldn't imagine this would be very useful for research, and that's why I wanted to test the browser comp, because that's really what it's all about, is researching really difficult to find questions.
Yeah, and that's why when the product manager from OpenAI talked about their agent, they basically said that it was a combination of operator plus deep research, which gave it the performance boost, because it's exactly what you're describing. They could scrape and do the text-based research component and then augment it with the other context and the ability to click around and the ability to go and like dive deeper, or maybe like use a slider on an embedded infographic and then take the context out of that. All of those components that a human would be able to do.
Yeah, that's how like Manus and some of the others, that's what they're doing, is combining computer use, computer vision, and all these things into one.
Yeah, any to any. Like
I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong though, because I remember testing this prompt about fictional character from the 60s, and it was when we were talking about the deep research Anthropic paper about what makes good research, and like I think we were both really surprised. Some of these questions that seem really not that hard, not that difficult, very hard for even advanced research agents. So
well, and also it's just kind of random shit. Like it's like this is the browser comp benchmark.
I found it right away.
That's great.
Sorry, I interrupted.
That's Plastic Man. Yeah. That's Plastic Man, yeah. So please identify the fictional character who occasionally breaks the fourth wall in the audience. Yeah, all this blah, blah, blah. He was known for his humor and had a TV show aired between 1960s and 1980s and with fewer than 50 episodes. The answer is Plastic Man. Apparently, this benchmark actually is quite challenging. I didn't realize this because I was looking at this seems kind of stupid. But on the blog post that they cite on OpenAI, of the problems in the verification campaign, 70% are unsolvable, based on these benchmarks using, I have to get the mod. This hasn't been updated for GPT-5. So yeah, this would definitely have changed, right? But on GPT-4o, it was 70% were unsolvable and 30% basically were solvable by GPT-4o. Oh no. Sorry, pardon me. They verified
really
it. Sorry, I'll just clarify that. So they verified it and tested it with GPT 4.5, 4.0, and 0.1 at a medium level of computational intensity, and then they also validated it with the Deep Researcher custom model. But that model that runs Deep Research has been specifically trained to be good at browser comp tasks. So it's like maybe overfitting for the eval, but on that one, it has a 51% accuracy with the Deep Researcher custom Deep Researcher model that ChatGPT has to run their Deep Researcher agent.
But do you see this? I take that back. I guess I was completely wrong, because I'm running Claude 4.5, Sonnet 4.5, asked that same question, and it's going off the rails with all the wrong answers that I remember from last time. Of course.
Did it get it right?
I don't think so.
Yeah. The answer is Plastic Man. Here, and there's the verification.
Yeah, the answer is Plastic Man. So the browser extension got it right. But you can't, you can't see my Claude desktop?
What's it doing?
Well, I thought I was sharing the entire screen.
I can see your browser and the browser extension.
Okay. Now you can see my screen, right? Or both?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see both.
Yeah, sorry about that. I was running off to the left, that same prompt, and it just through Claude Desktop, it got the answer wrong.
Yeah, okay.
but the browser extension, which I would have expected it the other way, I guess. And I don't know enough about how the browser extension works. Like,
I guess if
there's
you
not
go
much
up,
here.
if you go back up into the reasoning traces, we might be able to, like, you can see a bit of how it was doing on the actual browser. This one,
It's all
action
like so hidden.
Can you expose any of the reasoning stuff that's in
Nope.
there or no?
That's what I'm saying is it's kind of behind the scenes, so you can't fully see. But it seems like to me it's only using screenshots.
That's what it looks like after it clicks. You can see it clicking around.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna be doing some more. I'll be testing some more. That's interesting. I just ate my words in real time, live on the internet.
Surprise, surprise.
Yeah, not the first time. Won't be the last.
All right, cool. Where do you want to go next? So that's Claude 4.5. I was going to show you this Luma AI, this Ray update. You want to see that quickly, and then maybe we can dive into dive into the evals, this GPT Eval thing. So I was looking at this. I want to start every show. I want to start doing a few more like go-to-market things. So this is more like a.
I thought you were going to say make a song. That's my vote.
Mate, the music stuff is coming. But I got the new headphones, that's all. Where is it? I will check. Let's check it out on artificial analysis first. So the big news obviously in this world is I don't even have to do any kind of customized kind of searching, is Sora 2, right? And that is just going crazy. And have you been onto X recently?
Been trying not to, but
everything on there for me, it's just bananas. Like, so I've got a couple of examples. So Sora, basically they released a social app called Sora 2, which is cool and it's interesting. It's like leaning into the AI slop kind of concept of basically saying that this is just going to be an AI video generated kind of network or platform, which is really actually like, I didn't think it would actually be a good idea, but it looks like it's a very, very good idea, at least at the start. And the Sora 2 kind of performance is pretty insane. And the internet is now just full of basically this impersonate kind of mode of just videos of Sam Altman just doing crazy shit, which is pretty hilarious. It also just generates a bunch of like copyrighted content or like copyrighted characters and a bunch of other stuff. So I don't know what they're going to do about that, but like there's all sorts of stuff flying through these videos that's like, obviously there's like Disney characters, there's all sorts of stuff. There's not a lot of constraints.
The user's explicit, like in your prompt, you say Bob Ross. It's not like,
yeah. Well, I haven't used it yet, but it's basically, you can prompt it for styles, you can prompt it for characters, all of those things. So a lot of the videos you see are actually like, for example, this one is like SpongeBob SquarePants meets Breaking Bad parody mashup, right? And so like, they don't own the rights to any of that stuff, but they're just going for it in terms of like UGC and basically just having a crack at it, I guess. We'll see what happens. Unless they try to negotiate all these things in the background, which they may have done. Like there's things like this. Look at this one, which is like CCTV footage of Sam Altman stealing a GPU from Target and getting caught. Like that's pretty great. Like, and the physics of it, like, yeah, this model is excellent, but I think it's excellent in a more narrow band context. They're trying to like productize the model, so not make it generally kind of applicable. And I don't know if this is going to be available in the API. I hope so. Sorry, what were you going to ask?
No, nothing.
Look at this one. Look at this one. That's so hilarious. Anyway, so that is that.
Oh, I was going to say, you're talking about like all the copyright infringement. And I don't know the details of why did Anthropic get hit with that huge settlement, or they ended up settling, I think, right?
Oh, there's one they settled one, but there's heaps of them. There's heaps of them going apparently. So yeah, I don't know. Like I don't know how the courts are going to arbitrate all of this stuff. Like it's just really hard, right? Like I really don't know. I don't think they can anyway.
You think that's part of their fundraising at all? Like comes up in discussions where like, well, we're going to get hit with tons of lawsuits. So, all they talk about is like energy and GPU compute, but they've got to be expecting, the attitude is like, just do it and then we'll figure it out later. They know that they're going to get hit with some type of lawsuits or something.
Yeah. Well, the way I've heard it described is sort of like there's a distinction between generating, like the generation of content that infringes on copyright and uses a character or something that is like, but then there's the training side. And I think they try and make different legal arguments on both sides of that equation. But like, so if they use material in the training and they're trying to defend that versus like if they generate content that is copyrighted and they have guardrails. And like when we did the Claude system prompt review, like they're pretty hardcore about like trying to truncate that and trying to protect themselves. This app though, like is a complete like just like it's not considerate of that at all, which makes me think maybe they've tried to get the rights to all of it, or they're just trying to maybe they'll just run the gauntlet. Who knows? Like, I don't know what's going to happen. But the most popular feature, it seems, is, this is what, like, there's just heaps of these characters in here, like stuff from McDonald's and Pikachu, and like, they must have a plan. They must have negotiated something around this, because otherwise all their lawyers would just be flipping out.
Yeah.
Or maybe they're all just like YOLOing now because, this is what spicy mode and the grok image kind of generation thing was, whereas it's like, fuck it, like, let's just see what happens. So anyway, that should be exciting to see play out. What I was going to show you though is this Ray 3 model. So this is the artificial analysis leaderboard for text to video models. And I was using that on Replicate to try and do some video generation. And I wanted to show it to you because it's interesting it's interesting how it works, but also their method to improve the outputs as like a product overlay was really cool. It's similar to, I guess, the Google kind of approach, Veo 3, but I wanted to show it to you because it's a really interesting thing that you can use, and then it just makes the outputs significantly better. So let's go and check out Luma. That's not the actual one, but here are their models. So these are the different models you can access via the API, right? So reframe image, reframe the video. This is their core model, also known as Dream Machine, Ray Flash, which is cheaper, modify the video, all of these sorts of things. And then they combine them into their actual interface. So when you try and use, the reason why I got to this is I was trying to use, say, the Ray models on the API. It has the same functionality that you can use in their interface, but it's just not as effective. So you got your standard prompts and things like that, whether it's a loop, all of these are the variables you can pass in, start image and the end image if you've got like reference points on your image generation. And then also start video ID, which is if you've got a video you've created before, then you can just load up the file and say, just continue from here or change the scene to be this way. So it's probably one of the more advanced ones where application developers can actually engage with it in comparison to, say, Veo, which hasn't exposed all of these variables in their API, where apparently Veo 3 actually does have a lot of those. But what I wanted to show you is this, so Dream Machine. I was doing this for like just to mess around and also have some demo videos to show that aren't sensitive. But I was creating like a car chase scene that I was trying to make a video of my mate in a car racing through a city because he has this song that he always listens to, and when he hears it, he always imagines himself in a car chase. He does like amateur kind of speed racing and stuff like that. So that's his thing. So these were some of the videos here, which are pretty hilarious. And let's go in and check them out. These are some of the videos here. Let's see some of these. What's this one? A high-speed car chase through a downtown busy street. Yeah, all sorts of weird motions and stuff happening. It's all like back and forth. I'll actually show you what a generation looks like. And the reason why I wanted to bring this up is you can just create let's create a new board and say visualize. No. All right. I want to let's create a scene here That's complicated. So I might go to ChatGPT and say, what do you like, Cameron? Movies and drama. Create a text prompt. Romeo and Juliet adaptation of street gangs in New York in the 1800s. Let's see what it does with that. All right, that's pretty solid in-depth. That's a very solid in-depth prompt. That's very long. It's like a couple of paragraphs. We'll see if it even fits. A smoky gaslit street in the 1800s New York at night. Two rival street gangs, ragged young men, etc., are in a cobblestone alley. The air is cold. Yeah, all right, cool. In the center, Romeo, a defined yet noble young gang leader, locks eyes with Juliet, the daughter of his rival's boss, standing on a balcony above the chaos. All right, yeah, cool. So this should generate something. But what I wanted to show in here is that in their models, they've got this Ray 3 reasoning, a visual reasoning for complex tasks model. And what it actually does is it goes through, and as it generates, it annotates and tries to basically refine and redevelop scenes that it identifies as having miscues or poor execution or a range of those sorts of things in order to basically improve the final output. And it does it via this image annotation or frame annotation recut method that I saw a lot of people were talking about on VO3. So if you've got VO3 or like the Google model and you want to change a scene, or you want to do something, or you want to regenerate something, you can literally circle components and write on top of it in words and then put arrows and then regenerate it. And the model will actually read the frame and then execute those changes. What these guys seem to have done is actually put that into a product sequence where it will cut through the frames and then regenerate those components on the fly, just going back and forth and just sort of doing this iterative agentic kind of video loop. And it's the first time I've seen anything like that. So I'll just give that a second.
On the annotations, is it possible, of course, like drawing or like writing text to annotate, but do any of these models allow you to paste, like basically create like a mock-up? So with interfaces a lot, I'll take a screenshot of something and then I'll use Photoshop, but basically Photoshop it to how I want and then send that to the model to replicate. Can you do that with any of the video or image models? You know, like say you wanted my face on this guy, like just put a picture of my face instead. Does that make sense?
Yeah. They're not as effective at that. So I'll take that in two parts. I haven't seen that annotation component as like a user kind of interaction part on, say, a storyboard. Yeah, you see it doing there. So it's like it's circling these components, but it doesn't expose those reasoning components, but it traces, but it's basically giving us a sense of what are the things that it's changing based on the prompt. It's crafting the first frame and then it goes on. It's kind of cool how it like exposes. This is kind of like visual, like creative reasoning tokens, I guess. So I haven't seen that. It doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't exist. It probably does. On the actual like character consistency one, they're actually customizing the models. And we talked about this when we covered the VO3 system card, is that they will vectorize the images of the actors to be placed within the scenes as a component of the actual prompt, so that there's enough consistency across the frames to say, well, put this photo of Cameron in the driver's seat. And I think that's available in the Google, like the high-end Google, what do you call it, Flow subscription, whatever.
Yeah,
but it is part of their model, and it's actually how they trained it. So on that basis, like you can build it, but they execute it in a slightly different way. It still doesn't have as much of the controls. What I am interested to see is how these tools evolve with the world models that we covered last time, so that you could basically say, all right, well, generate me the 1800s kind of New York scene as a world model first, generate me the characters as sprites in a 3D context so I can generate them, and then let me just go in there and just direct. Or you do it yourself, and then it will be a much richer kind of experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there, that's like the reasoning.
Being able to move the camera around and kind of like direct, like a director would.
Yeah, there are some of those tools that have been built, but with the world model like thing is just like blows it out of the water. You just like, it would be way better as that. Whereas the ones that I was showing to you were like, you know, you could like, they tried to basically give you a 3D point cloud rendering of an image, say as a start or an end frame, and then you could interact with it and change the directions, those sorts of things. But it was imprecise. It was too imprecise. Like it wasn't. And I was my recommendation at the time, that was 3 months ago, was like, well, maybe we could render all this down as React code using React 3 Fiber or something. Then you could enter the scene and then recut it, and then you could actually kind of compose the scene. Whereas that's like a completely redundant idea now. You can just generate the whole world model on the fly using these like world model kind of examples, and then just pick whatever you want as the generation perspectives or the camera tracking or anything, right? Cool. So it's still rendering this down.
Do you think that,
and it's still changing?
With all that said, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, no, I'm just like commenting on here. You've got like the preview and the rendering, the generation, like then basically it's trying to improve the realism in the components. Yeah, so it's cool. So you can see it's sort of like the annotations, and then you can actually do it again. So it's kind of cool. It's like, yeah, you see there's an annotation there. It's sort of like, all right, well, rendering the tensile scene. It's obviously making a decision around some component of the action that doesn't make as much sense, and then recutting again. Yeah, it's really cool. It's cool to see, and it's cool that they kind of expose it as well.
Does anybody like use text to image or image to image models and then feed that into video models? Or because you can, trying to think, like VO, even you can do image to video, right?
Yeah.
So with the world models and all this new stuff, does that even make sense to do like like combined use of different types of models, and then you can get closer to where you want, what is in your head maybe?
Yeah, so if the end goal is like some sort of cinematic kind of controllable execution, so unlike Sora 2, it's generating everything from a prompt, right? And then there's inputs around like, you know, your face in this, and apparently the quality is very high, but the controllability is lower. But if you're trying to generate creative outputs, then you want controllability to be high as well. And the workflow that emerged was you'd build like a storyboard and then try and go through and create consistent imagery and image components across the scene. Say a scene is like 30 seconds and you can generate 5-second increments, and you've got like a perspective on like the cuts and the camera cuts and stuff. Then you might generate the images first in a storyboard and then try and use those images to execute your video generation and then patch it together. And then the VO model upgrade happened for VO3, and you could prompt it with specific camera cuts as well within the generation. And the generation started to get longer. But now, like what you're describing might be true. It might be a text to world model generation and then world model to video generation, right? Might be the new paradigm.
Yeah, that's interesting. While you were, I don't know, I was thinking about, I don't know if you've ever used like AutoCAD, and they have these libraries for different components and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
As you were talking through that, that's what I started thinking about. It's like, why wouldn't you be able to do that with image and video as well? Yeah,
exactly. Like there's no reason. Well, and I think that's like, as soon as we can get our hands on these, like the regular plebs can get their hands on these world models, like specifically the one from the Genie model from Google, I think a lot of those use cases will emerge, right? What I wonder is how controllable the world model will be. Like, is it something you can say, oh, around this corner, I want like this building rather than that building? Like, how much control will you actually have? Or will it just be completely random?
What's the time frame? You know?
No, I don't know. They haven't released the time frame. All right, so there's the end generation. So you saw how many kind of iterations that it went through just then. What's this? Is this a variant No, that's the draft. And those are the drafts that it went through. And then you can add audio in here. So it's not as complicated. It's not as holistic as some of those other models. But what I wanted to show was that kind of that reasoning chunks and the annotation method that it had. Yeah, and then you can see here like the product components they have on top are pretty handy, which is like, all right, here is my existing video, and I want to extend that video, or I want to adjust the start frame for the next generation and take it in a different direction, or use my storyboard to generate it. It's not perfect, and some of the actions sort of sucks, but I like the product execution here compared to some of the other tools. Yeah, so I thought just show you that.
So you're on Replicate?
I was on Replicate.
No, you said you were.
Yeah. So you can use this model, this Ray
Luma.Labs
model. Yeah, you can use the Ray model on Replicate, but it doesn't have that advanced kind of reasoning approach. This like Ray 3 reasoning, which is the model that I used then, as opposed to just Ray 3. And then these are the keyframes that you can use, like start and end frame, some of that stuff that you were talking about. And all of that is available in the API, but that reasoning component wasn't with the annotation.
Do you have a sense for what percentage of people are using web interfaces like this versus an API and writing scripts and things like that? Because like for me, I've explained I'm terrible. Like it's kind of fun, but it's also pretty frustrating, the image and video models. So I've had better luck like scripting it out and just having it run as like a workflow. But then I get into these web interfaces and I was like, that's not what I was asking for.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, like how many are there a lot of people doing it that way, scripting and using the API?
I don't know. The reason why I'm interested in it is I'm interested in the application side of this. Can you build agents to come in and interact with these tools in a meaningful way? Obviously, the API usage is huge because we see that through the primary model providers, right? The thing that, but I don't know. Like, I don't know if OpenAI publishes that around their image generation API use, or Google, or any of these other guys. Like, actually, we might be able to see that on. I don't know if you can see that on OpenRouter actually, because I think that's just LLM use. But the reason why I thought this was interesting is because the material outcome improvements that I saw in terms of the generation that I was looking for are as a result of this kind of productization process and this reasoning kind of annotation kind of flow. And I don't know what it would look like, but it has to look like some sort of agentic kind of app in the background, like what you and I are familiar with, where like it's like a React flow, like a simple React loop potentially on some sort of agent graph, just doing that and then reflecting on it and regenerating and looking at it like some sort of loop, right? That's sort of what I want to get at, because if you want to build components of these sorts of pieces of functionality into other apps, then you kind of need to know what those paradigms and those patterns are. So that's why I was also curious about it. Well, I think the majority of people who are using like this sort of stuff for like work in marketing and advertising are using it through these apps, but they're also using more production grade stuff. Like all of these companies that have these like enterprise engagements, and Google talks about that as well, with like big advertising agencies and stuff that they work with. So I'm imagining they're getting access to better shit and more advanced stuff than plebs.
So how long do you think, like what is the year and month that you think you'll, for the first time, go, yeah, I know it's AI generated and it's entertaining and I'll watch it? Or, you know what I mean? Like,
I don't know. I think we're there now. Like particularly with, I think the Sora performance, the Sora 2 thing is good in the context of it. They're really trying to target that short form video content, internet meme kind of space. And I was watching some of that and I was like, that's really entertaining, right? Like, but it's different. That's very different to, I think, our expectations of like, oh, can you execute an entire, movie? Well, no. And the bar for that is super high. I don't know. Lots of these things are popping up in films that we watch now, but
yeah, but even like shorts and
yeah, I think we're here now.
Clips and stuff.
This one made me laugh. Like this is like an 80s or 90s style Epstein Island ad done in the style of like a toy Like I watched that and I fucking like laughed my ass off. Like that was great comedy. Like
Yeah, somebody who's actually funny came up with that, you know.
well, yeah, I don't like it doesn't say what the prompt was. I don't know how much of this is built into the models, but it's definitely like, all right, if you pick the application, then yeah, I'll watch those videos all day because that made me laugh a lot. Like, but is it like he just asked, create a 90s style toy out of Epstein Island? Was that all? And then that's what came out? Or was it like big long prompt kind of process to actually get it to there? You never know with these things.
Yeah, I would be curious. I would be curious to know that. Because
Generate an 80s style toy commercial about
like,
Diddy toys.
Oh
my God. Oh my God, this is great. Look at this one.
Oh my God.
My God.
It even
Oh
has
my
the
God.
90s,
It's time for the oil. Holy shit. Yeah, very good. Very good. Like I'd watch that over actually going on TikTok. I think TikTok sucks. Imagine if Lord of the Rings was about the hobbits being in a homoerotic polycule. Holy shit. This is the best.
Oh my God.
They're in the bath together. Holy shit.
Yeah, I mean, it's on my side. It's like it's pixelated, but it looks so good. Even
I've got to post all of those in the show notes. They're fucking great.
Yeah. So Sora 2's on invite only, or like how do you get an invite?
You gotta apparently pro users get it, and then they get like 4 or 5 invite codes each. So I don't know. I can't be bothered just chasing someone up for an invite code on X. So I'll see. I bet we can probably get access to it soon. I'd say. Yeah. So that's video.
Buy it on the secondary market.
The only thing the last thing I wanted to talk through was this GDPEVal stuff and some strategy stuff. But is there anything else you wanted to go through, or do you want to talk through the MCP stuff too? This MCP tool use thing.
Let's save that because I was really just going to hit it high level. I'd like to dive into it because it's super of interest and relevant to me. So I plan to dive in and
go in. All right, what am I do?
By the way,
do you mind if we have a pause and a break?
Yeah, that's fine. Right as we were ending the browser comp thing, I pasted that prompt into my agent or desktop application that runs GPT OSS, and then it runs a deep agent that also runs GPT OSS. Yeah. And it got the question right away. So I was happy with that. Like I've been saying, I think you can, if you use systems, you can actually get better performance than what the top tier models provide. Yeah,
that's really cool. And that's something was that on the basis of is that an agent that you built or is that a pre-built?
I took if you remember talking about the Grok desktop app.
Yeah.
So I took that and I used it as a starting point. And then over time, I just started adding little things as I was using it. Like, oh, I wish it did this and that. So the other thing was I set up a deep agent, LangGraph deep agent. I think this one was running in Docker. I have deep agents running in all these different cloud environments and on my computer and on my server at my house, just kind of seeing how you can use them all together. But yeah, that instance, it was just the deep agent, LangGraph deep agent running GPT OSS on a Docker instance, and then that Grok desktop app on the front.
Yeah, so the last thing I wanted to talk about is something that I've been looking at for work, and it's raised a few questions that I thought would be interesting to discuss on the show. So one of the things I'm looking at putting together is component parts of our AI strategy for my day job. And part of that is sort of building up the business case and the story for adopting an AI first culture, and then also how you can actually think about the economic return of deploying agents into your organization and how your organization needs to change when agents are starting to take on more and more of the component parts of your workflow. So part of that, I was just basically because I'm communicating with a non-technical audience, and I think this is pretty common for anyone who's sort of in, our position in different companies where many of the benefits you can see as a product or a technology leader don't necessarily translate as immediately into the business language you need to communicate in terms of whether it's to a board or to, you know, an exec team or even like a general manager who's like adjacent to into the tech space. So this is particularly relevant if you work in a company where the primary product they have is not software or not tech products. But it's very pertinent because as we move into this like AI focused kind of work world, more of services are becoming software. But how do you communicate that? How do you prove that it's happening? How do you actually demonstrate the value? How do you kind of get people excited and not scared? So that's what I've been thinking about. Obviously, there's not I can't go into too much detail around the specifics of it because it's a bit sensitive. But one thing I did want to talk about as part of this, because I was looking out into the world at like ways to demonstrate those component parts of that story. And one of the more impactful pieces of work is this GDPEVal set, which we mentioned earlier in the show from OpenAI. Now, we've talked about the economic futures research and the data sets that Anthropic have published, which is excellent. I'm using that as well. But what I liked about this GDPEVal data set, and I might just bring it up and share my screen so we can talk it through and I can talk through the methodology. There we go. It's relatively simple. So it's a simple eval, and it's specifically tracked to high impact economic activity that has a high impact on real GDP. And so it's very good at answering the question of show me what AI can do right now that's an economically valuable activity. Not like an eval set, which is like, all right, run a vending machine, you know, vending bench. You're like, all right, that's pretty hilarious. But you're talking to someone who's like running a company, they're like, unless I'm a vending machine company, I don't give a fuck about that. This set actually is quite good at basically trying to address and expose the actual real economic value that AI can deliver today in a verifiable and kind of like consistent manner. So that's why I wanted to talk a little bit about it. There's the actual kind of, this is the blog post that I'm showing you on the screen. There's this kind of blog post, there's the paper that they have published, which I'll open as well. And then they also published the data set on Hugging Face, which is some of the information that you pulled up, which is now on our GitHub account, where they actually talk through and show some of the test cases in the eval set with examples. So I recommend jumping into that, all of that information. Basically at a high level, this eval identified a range of professions that had a significant contributing amount to American GDP. And then they identified a range of tasks. Yeah, so 44 occupations is the amount that they had. And that was selected from the top 9 industries contributing to US GDP. And then from that set, they identified about almost like, just over 1,300 tasks that are specialized. And then 220 of those tasks were used in this gold open source set. Each of those was vetted by experts in the field that they came from. And the experts that they got are from like all of the big companies in the US, like the tech companies, a bunch of the big banks, the consulting firms, like Boeing. There's all sorts of really hardcore experts that they recruited into this to verify in a 3-stage review verification of each of these tasks. They really went to a lot of effort to basically make it so that these tasks are industry specific and comprehensive, and also what one of these professionals actually would verify as saying this really is a really high quality reflection of something that I do in my day-to-day job.
And it's,
so that's the first,
judged by like highly skilled and experienced people is really the biggest difference, right? Because Anthropic economic, and it just runs the whole gamut. Yeah,
it's just like every kind of question, they try and map it to the actual kind of ONET tasks. Whereas this is different. They're like, these are tasks that industry experts in these areas say, this is very hard, something that I would often do, and something that's economically valuable. So then they got all these tasks, right? And then what they did, so here's an example on the screen. So there's like, these are the industries. There's like real estate and rental, rental and leasing, these different kind of areas. There's government related tasks. There's manufacturing, so mechanical engineers, industrial engineers, buyers and purchasing agents. So there's business tasks in here as well. Technical services like software development, legal, accounting and auditors, finance, project management, There's even healthcare stuff, which is really cool to read some of that. And then finance and insurance, a whole range of financial kind of tasks. Yeah, a whole bunch of stuff is in here. And interestingly, there's also producers and directors from like the news and film industry around like, and they've got some tasks around coordination organization. So those are the areas. And then they built up that data set using these experts. And here are some examples. So this is an example. Basically, it comes as like there's a big long prompt, which is basically like an instruction. And so, you know, in this case, this prompt is like, and I think you showed some of this, an example of one earlier when we were going through the browser use example, but this is another one where you can say like, this is, you know, it's June 2025 and you're a manufacturing engineer. In an automobile assembly line, the product is a cable spooling truck for the underground mining operations. And you are reviewing the final testing step. In the final testing step, a big spool of cable needs to be reeled in and reeled out 2 times to ensure the cable spooling works per requirement. Basically, it goes through that and then requests like basically a deliverable, a PDF deliverable summarizing the design that you know, you have to come up with as I guess this would be like a manufacturing engineer, kind of like a combination of like mechanical, structural, electrical, potentially. Yeah, basically you have to calculate everything, including like the different tasks around calculating design foundations such as stress, strength, cost, benefit analysis, etc. And then there's an attached PDF. And then on the right-hand side here is like an example of an experienced human deliverable output from that, which would be a PDF saying, all right, well, this is the kind of thing that I want to design. Here is the spec, etc., etc. So there's like an example output. Here's another one, which is like an order clerk, a wholesale analyst. And in this example, these are real examples that are in the data set. There's an Excel spreadsheet that they have to analyze. And another one is a producer for a film, which I mentioned before. And this is a production schedule. You'd have to develop a production schedule for an ad campaign that's being developed. And they're all very detailed tasks, right? And what they did was that they put this task through all of the leading foundation AI models. All these tasks of the big long set, they put them through 9 times each. And then they got experts in each individual field to grade the outputs. And then they also had actual real world outputs side by side. And then those experts basically just had to say, look, this, like, which one was better? Is this AI deliverable better than the other? So the other one, so it's a comparison, kind of like an LLM arena. The comparison is a human one, and the test one is the AI generated one. And they have to say this one is better, as good as, or worse than the other one to get a benchmark. And anything that basically says this is as good as or better is a pass, right, for the AI. And if it says it's worse, then it's a fail. Basically, that gives you a sense of like, these are real world economic like tasks of economic value. And getting experts to judge them to say, yeah, this is as good or better than the other one in a blind test to verify if AI can do these individual tasks. The reason why I found this great is because you can specify like at a narrow level, like an individual task level or at economically valuable activity. And you can actually pass your own data sets through this because OpenAI has also built like an AI grader that you can actually kind of like LLM as a judge, and you can actually build your own data sets and pass it through this kind of testing framework to test your own processes and individual tasks against it. Then the other thing is basically Claude Opus 4.1. So it's not even 4.5 that they released, but Claude Opus, not Sonnet, gets basically a 47.6% performance on either wins or ties with industry expert, like real world outputs. So it's almost at parity, basically saying that the generations from AI across this bench test of economically valuable activities is almost at parity with human experts. And that's not like, you know, these benchmarks that come out where it's like, all right, are they as smart as a PhD? You know, can they respond to like test results, which isn't as great as like, all right, in the real world, when you're working on real world tasks that businesses care about, how good are these things? Yeah. That's why I wanted to talk it through. Interestingly, this is an OpenAI research report, and GPT-5 High doesn't score as well as Claude Opus 4.1.
Yeah.
So it's kind of cool.
That was interesting.
That at least they didn't try and game it or not publish it. The other factors...
they gave flowers.
Yeah. The thing to call out here is, what I might do is I'll just jump over to the actual paper. So they have this this evals.openai sub website, which is cool, where they've got all of their different evals here. And there's a link to the data set. There's a link to this grading component where you can actually go in there and you can submit a Hugging Face URL and then run it through their LLM as a judge kind of validator, which apparently is within 5%, 5% on average equivalency to a human expert. So they basically said like their AI expert kind of grades almost as well as a human expert across all of these broad tasks. And they measured that by basically saying, if you got two experts, you know, two software engineers, and they had to review code and say like, how is this code high quality? Basically, those experts would be in agreement about 70% of the time. And the AI grader is in agreement with itself about 65% of the time, because these aren't deterministic things. They're kind of like professional opinions. Yeah. So that's really cool. That's there. And then this is the actual paper here. And yeah, this paper is sick, like if you want to read through it, but these are the headline results here. But what they do say is stylistically, some of the reasons why the human experts were able to kind of catch that the AI generated one was like that. Basically, there was AI generated was sometimes the AI would actually refer to itself by its name. It would say like, this is Grok, like Grok, like I'm Grok and I'm responding to this, or like stylistically OpenAI one like has a very certain like writing pattern that if you've seen it enough, you can pick it up in terms of use of dashes and all those sorts of things. But what the researchers didn't want to intervene and actually like sanitize the outputs, because they felt like that would be kind of interfering with the methodology. But they did call that out and say some of them were just picked up because like it said, hey, I'm Grok. So they're like, oh, well, that's obviously AI. So they chose the human one. And then, yeah, the only other one that I really wanted to call out was this, which is cool, which is basically, it's the first time I've seen like an actual validation and quantification of the cost and speed improvement against real world business, like high value tasks by AI models using like cost improvements from AI assistants to human experts. Like in this scenario, when you run these tasks through, it's basically saying like, if they put in the prompt of like, try this, like task, whatever it was. And I might open some of the Hugging Face examples that you pulled out, because they are actually quite challenging. Like they're not easy. Basically saying like, try this, try completing this task this many times. And if still unsatisfactory, like fix it yourself. Basically the speed improvement and the cost improvement of AI assistance and augmentation is basically almost 50% on each variable. So 50% speed improvement and a 50% cost improvement. So if you aggregate that up across like an organization, you can start to get a quantification of actually what your expected productivity gains could be using a combination of these data sets and this methodology. That's why I wanted to talk it through. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, totally. I'm with you as far as I think this paper resonates with the real world much more, because it's more focused on capabilities, where Anthropic's was like more adoption, right? And I think it had a lot more noise that could distract people. Like, oh, those are just like low level tasks. But what we're talking about here is very skilled, experienced labor, right? Labor tasks.
Yeah. And
how would you...
And an actual verification, right? An actual verification of, and it's not like, so it's important to call out for this data set, it's a verification of what an expert thinks is better, but it's not actually what is actually correct. So it's trying to benchmark things that are in the next batch of tasks that agents and AI will take on for real, which is non-deterministic things. Whereas in coding, it's deterministic in like, all right, did it execute? Did the code run? Does it pass the tests? Is more validated, like you can validate it more effectively. So the only way, well, not the only way, but a way you can design a methodology like this is by saying, all right, people who know, who would be estimating and grading the stuff in the real world, basically saying this is better or worse or about the same as something that I would accept in the actual real world, but doing it in a blind, like a blind study, so that you can get a benchmark. Sorry, while I'm pulling this up.
Yeah, that's a good point. As far as like, it's not necessarily the best answer or right answer, but it's like the preferred answer. And I was thinking about like email, for instance. A lot of times in my, people coming out of college, new into the workforce, will spend a bunch of time writing like the perfect email, and then they write a really long email and just no one reads it. So it might be more complete and it has better information, but the message is like completely missed. You know, I don't know if that's a good example. I would imagine some of that comes into play here.
Yeah. Well, I have my well, here's some examples that maybe I can pull up, which is, and I think I can speak directly to that, which is sort of like, well, how valuable is this? And how can you really think about deploying AI into economically valuable activities? This is a task here, which is like the sector is in finance and insurance, and the occupation is a financial and investment analyst. Now, we've seen a lot of these examples, but this is a pretty complex, like in like ChatGPT usage and stuff. But the prompt is pretty comprehensive. It's basically, you're an investment banking analyst in the equity capital markets group. It's a made-up company. Given the recent market volatility, one of your clients who trades in the public market is interested in deep diving on the S&P 500 to investigate where PE multiples are for all 500 companies. And then there's public data sets, find me the PE multiples. And then basically in an Excel spreadsheet, include the forward-looking PE multiples using these combinations plus the backward-looking ones next 12 months, dividend yield, amount, earnings per share, all that sort of stuff. Your goal is to develop an easily sortable Excel file that your seniors or clients can use to investigate which subsectors are the best. Right. So that's an example of one. And there's no like reference files that the AI had to use for that. And then there's some other ones where it might be like in financial and investment advice, like the goal is to set a high level overview materials to clearly lay out the key private players and understand how publicly traded names are valued on revenue, EBITDA, and PE multiples based on a request from a managing director at an investment banking firm. That's creating 5 key PowerPoint slides, the key private players in a specific sector, all of that sort of stuff. Now, that's an example where in this data set, like that's a relatively complex task. It requires research and formatting and composition, all those sorts of things. The test of that in this data set, in this study, was if an expert basically would look at it and say, yeah, that's as good as or better than like the actual real life version. But what it doesn't tell you is that actually better on its utility or its intention than the human version? For example, in this investment space, like giving financial advice, can you benchmark and test the financial advice or the accuracy of these things against actual, the actual human output? Because that's also what you want to know. It's like you want to know, I don't care if my manager or my experts say it's better. Is it actually fundamentally better? Is also very important. So in the sector I work in, which is the next question I'm looking to validate, is like, it's in the areas of asset valuation. Not only is it better in a professional context around the professional opinion, but is it actually better, or can it be made better, or is it actually worse than the professional estimation and prediction? Now that's the more fundamental question. It's not just if the managers think it's better, it's actually, is it actually better, or maybe it's actually materially worse and they just can't tell. Now, those are the questions that would come off, and it would be great. I know that this is sort of at the start of this GDPEVal thing. It would be great for them to expand it into that kind of validation, which is like point-in-time predictions or some sort of validation around how the quality and not just the estimation of acceptability, which is currently the methodology.
Yeah, I know you called me out last week for always saying, oh, I'm going to dive into this, but there's so much. But like this is really valuable. And I do plan to step through these because there are certain things that, I don't know if skepticism is the right word, but like these prompts are so specific. That's not really how I think it's a good start, paints the picture, gets to the point, but if you're like really comparing it to people, that's not really how the world works. Most of the time, my experience is it's not like people asking you to do things specifically. It's like hearing a conversation or leaving a meeting and then you deciding, here's what I need to do, right? So there's so much context to develop that idea of what I need to do.
You're right, there is. And that's also like the difference between a task and a job. Right. We know that tasks are not jobs. You doing your job, particularly for a knowledge worker, involves having context and being able to synthesize those things and look ahead. So I acknowledge that is true. And like that's why I think the doomers around work are kind of like, that doesn't make any sense, because like human creativity to synthesize these things means that we will level up and go above like the agentic kind of workflows that sit beneath us so that we're still able to sort of facilitate those things. It's just an adjustment that will occur, kind of like when we started using power tools rather than hand tools. But the reason why I think it's important for these prompts to have these such long and detailed things is because you imagine if you had to do that, like this one is a wholesale trade, like sales worker, and you're the director of strategy at a prestige cosmetic brand. That sounds like you, Cameron. Like, it has a lot of context. It's very, very long. Probably if you were doing this job, because the output is like to create a couple of PowerPoint slides and you've been working there for a few years, you'd already have a lot of that context in your mind, right? But the LLM doesn't have it, right? So that's sort of part of why they had to do it like this. And it's also why agent engineering is really context engineering, is because of that truth. Is just like the quality of the output will be defined by the quality of the context you put into it. So I can understand why they did it like that. But yeah, you're right. It is a constraint, because if people look at this and go, well, you know, I never brief my assistant or someone at this level of detail because I know they've got more context. Those are often also the people that when they ask ChatGPT for shit, they have to go through maybe 20 rounds of questions before they actually, and back and forth before they actually get the answer, because they're actually enriching the context enough so that the LM knows what they actually really want so they can get the answer that they need. Yeah.
So how did they, I know that they leveraged all these professionals and everything, but I missed, how did they come up with the specific tasks? And the reason I ask is because I've been wondering about the feasibility of actually using like traces and, you know, data from your computer on like, here's what I actually end up doing, and being able to create those tasks, run it through this data set. I mean, I mentioned I'm running Claude code through like Langsmith. So I'm wondering, can I take that data and will it be useful for these types of things? Of course, now I'm just like coding all the time.
Yeah. I actually don't know about that. Because this is different to an eval set, right? This is very different. It's like, it's called GDPEVal, but it's very different to like what we would build as an eval set that comes out of a product, you know? So actually what they did was they recruited these experts across the industries. They had a minimum of 4 years experience. The average was 14 years experience, and they had to have a high degree of professional recognition in their sector. Then they had to have a video interview, a background check, and then training and a quiz and a quiz to participate in the project. So they did a bit of testing on who they were. And then some of the places that they worked, Accenture, Apple, Bank of America, Barclays, BBC News, Boeing, yeah, like some really high level companies, PwC, Morgan Stanley, like, yeah, the works. And then basically what they did was that they asked those people to generate, where is it over here? They asked those people to generate the task. So the task creation was basically, it consists of two primary components: a request, often with reference files, and a deliverable that's required. The work product experts classified their requests, or like things that they basically generated that were relevant to their actual jobs and what they actually do. They generated those things, those tasks. Where is it up here? It's somewhere up here. They generated those tasks, and then they put it through a quality control pipeline where basically they said the first stage of reviews was general task guidance. So they had this 3-part thing around the actual tasks. The task was created by the expert in a specific occupation. They gave general feedback, and then the original task author completed the revision of that. The task that went to a second stage review by other occupational experts to give guidance and feedback. The original author then refined it, and then there was more feedback. And then there was a third stage of reviews as well to make it more relevant from task experts. So it's like a 3-pass thing. Basically, they were trying to make them as high quality and as highly relevant as possible using multiple different perspectives. So that's why they call it this gold subset, the gold subset of tasks. So it seems pretty robust to me. More robust than I think just taking like the specific questions that go into, say, Claude, and then trying to map that to an ONet task of someone who might be like a financial analyst, and then trying to approximate those things. I'm really excited to see what this is with Claude 4.5 now, or Sonnet 4.5. Cool. All right, dive into it. I'm going to use it. I'll share the rest of the stuff that I get from it with you later.
Do you, what do you plan to do? Like, how are you going to analyze the data or extract it? Any ideas?
What I'm intending to do is I think the way to think about the deployment of AI across an organization would be like there's your operational kind of deployment, and you can think about that in multiple ways, but sort of like how people are using it and then how you productize it. And those are different things. And productize basically meaning like take on processes that are abstracted away via automation as opposed to augmenting your existing people. Then there's how you use AI to build a competitive edge in the market. Like how do you actually build products or augment your existing kind of value creation process with the innovation that AI enables? And that's a very different thing, because the prior thing that I described around your strategy is just a source of comparative advantage. Comparative advantage basically just means doing something better than other people. And that's still great. You can still win like that, but that's not a sustainable mode. And everyone, because of the distribution of AI tools, everyone is basically on that path. So if you don't do that, it's not necessarily comparative advantage. It might just be like you're keeping pace with the market. Whereas actually looking into the real inner core of how you create value and then trying to build defensible innovation that's enabled by all of these component parts of AI, the new AI kind of computing paradigm, could be a source of defensible competitive advantage, which basically means you're doing something different to your competitors. But the overlay on all of this is harder to kind of define, is how exposed are regular businesses to just the general bitter lesson reality of AI, which is you may find that a lot of your operational kind of competitive edge is abstracted away into these large foundation model players. And how do you defend against that? Like you can't necessarily innovate your way or develop your way into a competitive position when OpenAI is spending like $400 billion on compute and will just generate like these models that take on like that eventually will become like an artificial superintelligence, right? Like, and then how much of that is interconnected into all these different things that basically like there will be industries and there will be things that just disappear, right? And then how do you think about that? Like that's really hard. That's really, really hard. It applies to every company, not just non-tech companies. It applies to every other tech company that isn't one of the big foundation companies. So I don't know the answer to that, but maybe that's just a pipe dream. Like that's very long-term kind of thinking. Maybe it won't work out like that. We don't know, because there's one thing for certain is just like, we don't know what's going to happen. So it's better just to focus on the here and now, because like there are things like that GDPEVal set that you can do right now that are economically valuable, that are really, that span across large parts of the economy. And so just focus on those is probably in the short term is the thing to do.
Yeah. I don't feel like I hear enough about using AI for that competitive advantage in terms of like identifying opportunity costs and, creating better customer experience, catching all those licenses we forgot to cancel or using them more efficiently. It's stuff like that. I feel like I know people are absolutely doing that, but I think a lot of that's kind of overlooked.
Yeah, I think the way I would summarize that or describe that factor is that we're kind of in the mode right now of adoption where the analogy I'd give is like every employee has a calculator, but it doesn't mean that economic value that's created by those calculators when people were just writing with pencil and paper before is accruing to the companies that employ those people. And so the economic value exchange is actually from the individuals back up to the ChatGPTs and the Anthropics of the world for the most part, unless it's like at a bottoms up kind of adoption rate of software. That excludes like the big hyperscalers and all this spend that like different companies are putting on to, different pieces of like infrastructure. So if they might want to spin up their own like, inference cloud or whatever, like that is a separate kind of component and there's a lot of money going into that. But at the everyday level of like productivity gain and, making people more productive in their work and like the task, which is the individual task level, which is very kind of 2023 if you consider what AI like agentic products can achieve now. Really, like a lot of companies I think are still just can just single tasks get better and more efficient and more accurate. Then a lot of that economic value is not accruing to the companies that employ the people who do that. And that's sort of one of the tensions, I think, when a lot of people, they say, oh yeah, I rolled out a lot of executives that are like, yeah, I rolled out a couple of AI kind of pilots and all of them failed to move, the needle on certain variables. And it's like, well, it might have moved the needle on the individual, but maybe you just like, you still paid them the same amount. Like nothing changed in your operational execution. It was just that person might have gotten a little bit more efficient or a little fewer spelling errors or a little faster at building a spreadsheet. Like, how valuable really is that? On the flip side, there are case studies which are very kind of extreme, like all of the Sierra kind of like customer success, customer support kind of case studies, or the Klarna one is like the big one that the canonical one that people reference, which is like $40 million worth of operating expense got pulled out of the business literally overnight, and like a bunch of like 80% of their support staff got fired. Like, and that's also the ones that are very scary for people to hear as well. Is you're like, well, what's going to happen to all these people and all these jobs? And like, I don't think that's the common, to be honest, I don't think that's the common pattern. Like Aaron Levy, the CEO of Box, talks about this a lot on X, and he's basically saying like and he deals with a lot of big companies through Box. And he says the primary way to think about it and the way that they communicate it is like, you are able to do so much more in the long tail that you weren't able to do as an operational kind of unit now. And that gives you power, and it gives you things you didn't have before. But we just need to figure out what that looks like as a pattern for your individual organization. What does it look like when all of your employees can do the long tail of things that they couldn't get to because there's only so many hours in the day?
You're saying that the organization will be more empowered to do things they couldn't before, and therefore maybe it's not a matter of like displacing everybody, but now we can do more, so we still need people. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I don't think people are going anywhere.
I'm very
I think
much
like
on that. Like we hear all
people
this
are tool.
doom and
We use
like,
tools, right?
No one's gonna have a job. Yeah, we're talking the same language. It's like you can do more, so you're gonna need people. Think about how I would love to see a graph of the hiring rate for OpenAI and Anthropic and Google. Like, I don't know. I don't think it's downward.
I think they're shifting people around. I don't know. I think a lot of public companies do this a lot when there's an excuse to lay off people. If there's an excuse, then they will use that excuse to basically cut people. Yep. That's a very common thing. Like you saw it during COVID or whatever, like when they could cut people, they did, and then they had an excuse. I think AI is also becoming a bit of an excuse for these bigger companies, particularly public companies, to say that they're reducing headcount, which often is not necessarily something that public market investors view positively, because if you're adding headcount, it means you're growing. Whereas this gives them the opportunity to maybe cut without getting the haircut from the public market investors. So I think there's a lot of noise actually in trying to find real world kind of like productivity gains in large companies deploying AI at scale because of that. But yeah, my opinion is like we're tool users, and like as humans, like we've always done this. Every piece of productivity gain we've ever gotten through like history has come from using tools. Like as soon as we picked up rocks and started bashing them against shit, all the way through to fire, to like the shovel, to the tractor, to like the phone, to AI. Like it's just what's going to happen. And every time it happens, there's massive growth in productivity. Like, yeah, I'm not a doomer at all. I think everything's going to be rosy in the future, to be honest. But that depends if Demis Hassabis gets his way and AGI takes over.
I think all that talk like that is going to also discourage people. And, you know, you're talking about companies using AI for an excuse. Well, I mean, people are going to use that as an excuse for employment because they don't think they're capable, or, well, AI fucked everything up, you know, like that's already happening, I think.
Yeah, I will say I'll caveat what I said before in terms of my optimism as saying there will be displacement. There's a lot of shit's going to change. Like there will be problems in the economy. Like in net effect, it will be positive, but overall there will be pockets of impact. There's lots of like economic studies on the impact of technology and how it's adopted that show this. Like, you know, there's not many horseshoers around still, right? Or blacksmiths and shit. Like, you know, like if you were one of those people at the time when like industrial production started taking off, then it was more likely that your kids were the ones who benefited, but you personally, economically, definitely had a problem in your life for a long time. So like that will happen, but in aggregate, the benefits I think are pretty obvious to see in how it's going to roll out. I think the problem is how individual companies actually leverage it, as opposed to it being like this diffuse individual kind of enabler. Like that's one thing that I'm kind of struggling to articulate or really see through, which is like, how do you build something that an organization really, really leverages for a competitive edge that is defensible for you and sustainable in at least, you know, the medium term, because everything changes so fast. Like, for example, world model stuff that we talked about last week, like that's heating up so quickly. Like how do you plan in that scenario in a regular kind of, as a regular organization, if you're like, I don't know, a lower level manufacturing organization that might be looking at, you know, investing capital, and you're like, well, what's going to happen with robotics? This stuff is moving really, really fast. That would be really challenging.
I agree. And that's, you know, I have a special place in my heart for the small and medium businesses. I mean, really the backbone of everything, but a high risk of getting left behind for sure. So I want to help you folks. If that's you, I want to help you as much as I can.
If that's you, and if it is you, you better like MCP because that's what you're going to talk about. You know what you need is an MCP server.
MCP overhaul on everything.
All right, mate, that's probably enough for today. Good chat. See you next week. So next week, let's do middleware, probably some sort of Gemini 3 review. And what was the other thing you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, I guess if it's going to be out. And then I'll spend time on I forgot what it's called. The Cloudflare concept.
Yeah, code as MCP. I'm really excited to see that in action, actually, which is like, rather than MCP tool chunks, it's code execution over the top of the MCP kind of API server to make it more reliable. I didn't realize how a bunch of that shit worked. So yeah, if you can talk us through that, that'd be great.
Yeah, and they're not the first to come up with that concept. I've experimented with that myself, but I'm not going to claim that I came up with anything at the level they did. So I look forward to it, and focus next week on those things.
Cool, man. All right. Until then.
All right, Tom, you have a great weekend. Good chat.
You too, mate.